Welcome to the digital art class. I'm using Autodesk Sketchbook on my M1 iPad Pro. This is going to be a tutorial or an instruction in digital art doing a simple landscape. So it's just a basic landscape. It's going to involve some a blue sky, some trees, a bit of a mountainous background, rolling hills kind of thing, and some foreground. Fairly straightforward, not too complicated. So I'll begin by laying in, I've got a large spray brush right now. I'm just going to begin to lay in some of the sky, and you can see that I'm separating my strokes going across here. And the reason for that is although I do want good coverage, and I am doing the entire area for right now because I'm going to cover this over anyway. The reason why I'm doing this is because I do want some sections of white in here. Not a lot, just a little. And the reason for that is because I'm going to use that to my benefit in a couple of minutes. I'm going to be using those little areas of white to lay in some cloud formations. So I've got basically a good portion of the canvas covered now. So at this point, what I'm going to do is I'm going to change my color, and I've got some colors picked out here. I've got a color palette I've already pre-made, and so I'm going to go with a little bit darker color here, more of a greenish. And I'm going to change my brush. I'm going to put in this scatter brush, and I'm going to keep my opacity at about 60% and keep the brush about 50%, give or take. And I just want to put in, actually I want to create a new layer. So we'll do that. And I just want to put in some indications of some hills back here. You're going to see that with the scatter brush, it is fairly pixelated, or what we would call sort of dotty. And that's okay, because that's going to work to our advantage as well. In a couple of minutes, you'll see why. I'm just sort of laying in where I think the rolling hills will be. Here we go. And I'm just going to shoot across here and get a general sense of the where I want it to be included. I'm going to go a little bit larger on the brush, and I'm just going to lay in some shape and stroke and whatnot, just to give it fill it in a little bit. And I'm working with some sort of line intent, as I like to call it, because these light and dark areas I'm going to enhance later on. So I'm not filling the whole thing in, such as I could with a bucket fill tool. I'm just being fairly sporadic here. And these little light and dark areas are going to work to my advantage in a couple of seconds. I'll show you how. So I don't want to do too much here and lay in too much overkill. I'm going to darken this, or lighten this color a little bit, just because I want to sort of, and make a new layer. I just want to put in some highlights here, just in certain areas. You can see the color value is lighter, just using the same brush. And what this does is it creates depth, distance, and different areas of shape. Now this is at a distance, so it's not going to be too sharp in focus. But you can kind of see now that with just that little bit of work, this rolling hill area is starting to develop. starting to get some real look to it here. Something that you might see if you were looking at a pasture or a field or something in real life. I'm going to create a new layer now. And what I'd like to do now is I'd like to put some trees in the footer area of this hill. And to do that, I'm going to use, let me see now, I think I'll actually stay with the same brush. However, what I'm going to do is I'm going to reduce its size quite a bit and its opacity on a new layer. And I'm just going to create some little foothill, maybe bring up the opacity a little bit so we can see it better. Just some little, what I'm hoping it will be some tree shapes in the distance. They're a little bit darker because they're in a shaded area. I'm just basically making little movements, crisscross movements, up and down movements. And I'll be able to highlight this as well. But I'm not really looking for a whole lot of detail here. I'll come in here from the other side. Not a lot of detail is going into this. I can work the detail with when I highlight this area. And I'm not too worried about this area down here where it's rough. That's going to be, I'm going to take care of that with some blurring brush motion and also with my footer color when I add my footer color in. Maybe do a little bit more over here. Actually take it up a little bit so the trees are a little more accentuated here on the ends, each end. In fact, I kind of like that, so maybe I'll add a bit more. Just give it that sort of, a little bit more of a distinctive shape to it. That some things are happening back in here. And again, we'll highlight these in a couple of minutes. Not too much, just enough to sort of keep them distinct. So with that, I'll go into a lighter, use this green here, go into a lighter green, new layer, and I'm just gonna go on top here and increase to 100% of opacity. I'm just going to sort of rough in little areas here and there. Not too worried about fine detail because this is all happening far out in the distance. So it's not going to be really, it's just going to be there. It's not going to be prominent in the overall piece whatsoever. So with that, I'm going to now create a new layer, and on my new layer, I'm going to introduce my footer area color, and I've got that here, but I'm just going to lighten it up a little bit, to about there, maybe to about here. And I'm going to go back to my airbrush on a new layer, and I'm going to do a sweeping motion across like so. I'm leaving a little bit of an area in here, you can see, because I'm going to be covering this up anyway. But I just want to, when you do this, and you're not too, I'm going to take that back. When you're not too specific in leaving certain areas open, it works to your advantage in the end because it creates differences in the overall area. In other words, already I can see that I can put a path in here. I can put even water if I want back in here. But it's kind of lending itself to help me to figure out where I want to do different things. So it's worked out quite well, and it usually does work out well in that way. This is my sky layer. I'm going to go and create a new layer above it. And I'm going to go to a little bit more of a cloud brush or color. And I want to work with this brush again, my scatter brush, on a fairly sort of mid-range opacity. Bring the brush up a bit, and I'm just going to do some little basic circles in here. Might be difficult to see. I might increase that opacity. I think if I keep it in this area, you'll probably begin to see that I've got some of it in here, in the white area, which is where I intended to have clouds anyway. So I'm going to continue on. I'm going to create another little bit over here. I can always zoom in. You may be able to see it a little bit better now. I'm just doing little circle motions and creating an area where I can establish some cloud formations. So with those done, I'm going to go to another new layer. I'm going to darken this. Maybe to about there. Same brush. Maybe lower the opacity a wee bit. I'm just gonna, even more so, I'm just gonna put in some little indications of shadow in the cloud. Still doing the circular motion, making little circles like this and like that, little tufts. I'll go over to this side, do the same thing. Here we go. Nothing too major, nothing too major. I just want this to be distinctive and illustrate that it's, you know, a darkened area below the cloud. What I think I'll do is I will go to a smudge brush, and I'm going to smudge that in a little bit. Just a little. I'm going to zoom it out so you can see this is a dark area. And I'm just going to take and sort of smudge in the bottom area of this. I'm on a very low opacity. I'm on about 6%, maybe even lower. Let's try 2%, because this particular brush, you got to be very careful with it. You don't want to smudge the whole thing and erase it all out. I'm just softening the bottoms of this dark area. I can intensify them as well, but if I pull it way back, you can kind of see now the cloud formation is in there. I may change this area in here and add more blue to it, but because I've got everything on a different layer, all these colors and shapes on different layers, it enables me to go in and target any particular layer and change it and alter it. Here we go. Now what we're going to do next is, you can see these light areas in the back of the rolling hills here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to create another layer which is below this area. This is the area here. On, off. I've created a new layer below that, and I'm going to go into a darker color. I don't think I want it to be real super dark, and I want it to have green in it. Still with the same brush, I'm going to go in and I'm just going to darken this in. Maybe get a bit more opacity on here, up to about 70%. And I'm just going to redefine the edges here. And this is all underneath this main hill area as well. So I can remove it, I can change it, I can do whatever I want with it. I'm just putting in little areas that are much darker. If I create a new layer and go into a completely different color, excuse that bump there with the camera, that was my fault. I bumped it. I'm going to go into this color here that I'm using for the land area, the lower land area. I'm going to go into more of a brown, and I'm on a new layer. And watch this. I'm creating a whole nother dynamic to these hills back here, putting in a color value of more of a brownish kind of, like there's rock back here, and I'm doing this in an area that you would perhaps find it to be rocky. So I'm just doing some basic shapes here. Just sort of filling things in. Now when you zoom back, you're going to see that there's really, this rolling hill has really taken on a lot of different look to it, hasn't it? So I'm going to bring it back up. I'm going to go above all of these layers, above the flatland area, what I call the flatland area, and I'm going to go into my darker color, and I'm going to go into, let's see, my brushes here. This is basically a flat brush. At about 70%. And I'm just going to, actually no, pardon me on that. I'm going to try this. I've just been working with this abstract brush lately, and it has interesting qualities. I normally wouldn't use this for this type of thing, but I'm going to put in some trees, and I just want to see how it reacts when I go to put in some trees. This is very dark, so I'm going to lower the opacity. In fact, it's still a bit dark for me, but I'm going to go ahead with it. Might just lessen it a little bit more. With something this dark and intense, with respect to the color and this style of brush, if I go a little bit less on the opacity, I'm bumping it up to 40, about 40. What begins to happen is things really start to emerge on the canvas, and you might not have the exact same type of control that you want to have. It's just going to be a basic tree, a couple of limbs. Not going to get too excited about the limbs and whatnot. I'm just using my finger here, my pinky, to steady myself on the canvas. And that's all I'm going to do right now. Maybe have a branch coming out here. Maybe another little one out here. We could do the same thing here. Just fairly basic, fairly straightforward. Nothing too wild. What I was about to say though is it allows you to press harder with your stylus if you've got a lower opacity, and you can maintain some sort of continuity in terms of your strokes. I'm going to go into my mountainous color that I have in the background, and I'm going to change my brush back to the scatter brush, or texture brush. Keep the opacity about 60. Bump up the size a little bit. And I'm just going to do a round motion over here. And I'm basically just laying in some foliage. Now, it's not very dark right now, as you can see. I'm kind of using that to my advantage because I want to get the overall shape of the foliage, and I do have that now, so I can go over it. I'm not too worried about covering up these branches. They would be covered up anyway. And I'm going to show you a little trick here. I think that's not too bad. Show you a little trick here. I'm going to duplicate this layer. So here's the duplicate, and I'm going to merge it. Here's the merge control. I'm going to merge it down. So now if I turn this layer off, you can see it's all on one layer now. So I'm okay with that. I'm going to make another layer, go into my lightest green. Now this is a bit of an olive green, and I'm just wondering if maybe I brighten that up a little bit more. We'll see how that works with the same brush. And I'm going to increase the opacity a little over 80% on a new layer. And just in certain little areas, whoops, that's a little too much. And I'm going to decrease the opacity. I don't want it. This color is really quite vivid. And I'm just tapping in little areas here and there and here. And you can see that it's kind of just sort of highlighting in certain areas. Now, something I can do too is I can duplicate this layer here, make it even darker, and I think what I might do is I might change the color balance. So I might introduce a little bit more green into it. Click done. So you can see there's the difference there. Dull, vivid, dull, vivid. Now what I can do, if it's a little too vivid, you can see it here, I can just decrease the opacity right here, just to get a happy medium. And for that matter, I could even merge both these layers. I don't want to right now because I still want to have the control. But what I am going to do to speed up this project a little, because I see we're getting a little bit late in time, is I'm going to duplicate the branch area, or the tree that I made. I'm going to drag that over here. I'm going to flip it. Flip it. I'm going to click done, and I'm going to get my eraser tool. I'm going to take some of the branches out here. Where are we here? Splatter shape. Get my soft eraser on that layer. Get the opacity. And I'm just going to take some of this out. I want this tree to be off in the distance. I'm not too worried about taking out some of the branches. I don't want to duplicate everything. I'm just trying to show you a sped up version of how you can utilize something you've already drawn and use it a second time. So I'm just getting rid of certain areas. I'm going to keep pretty much like that, maybe get rid of this. But it speeds things up, and which is neat and which is good, because sometimes you don't have time to maybe what I'll do is I'll just increase my brush size, decrease the opacity, and I'm just going to swoop over it a little bit so it's not quite so prominent. There we go. And I'm going to make use of the foliage as well. Why redraw something if you don't have to? So I'm going to duplicate that, flip it, bring it over, and I'm going to also reduce the size. So I'm going to bring it over a little bit here. It's further away, so it's not going to be as large. Done. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to duplicate that again, and that is a little bit darker than I want. So I'll undo that, keep it the way it is. I'm going to make a new layer, go on to my texture brush, and I'm going to put some highlights in this, and I'm going to make the opacity a little bit lesser yet, because this is further away, so it doesn't need a great deal of detail. Okay, now if I thought, here's the tree right here, if I thought that this was a little too light or not dark enough or whatever, I can change it by duplicating it, drawing over top, anything I want to do. But what I like to do is I'd like to spend a bit more time down here on my flatland area, but in order to get myself in that area, I'm going to create a new layer, go to a much lighter color, and I'm going to go back to my airbrush, on my airbrush, and I'm going to decrease that quite a bit, and I'm just going to put in some little areas here and there with some darker areas. I'm just going back and forth, not paying a great deal of attention to any fine detail, but I want to illustrate that there's different things going on back in here, as any textured area would be in the wild. So it's coming together quite nicely here. And then now what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in here on a new layer, and I'm just going to put in some indications here and there of little sticks and little field areas that might be, going to go a little bit lower on my opacity here, that might be near the trees. This kind of defines this area a little bit better. Makes it seem a little more together and natural. I might even go a little bit smaller on the brush. And similarly with this one, this tree back here, I'm just gonna lay in a little bit of, lay in a little bit of ground area or dirt area that might be near the tree. Just get something in there, get a little bit wider on the brush. Something along like that. Now I'm going to go above my highlighted land area with this land color, and I'm going to change my brush to the scattered texture brush, and I'm going to reduce that a little bit. I just want to come in behind here. Actually, that'll be in front. Yeah, that's right. Okay, and I'm just going to lay in some areas back in here just to define the break between the lower trees in the back area, and the forward ground color. And I'll pull this out to the side. And what I think I'll do is I'll go back to this color here, reduce my brush a wee bit, and the opacity. And I'm just going to lay in a bit of highlight here under these darkened areas, just to give a little bit more detail to the ground. I think that's about all we need. One final touch. I'm going to go above this layer, create a new layer, and change my color. Go into the brownish color on the same brush, reduce the opacity, keep it about the same size. And I'm just going to put in the indication of a little path coming across here. Just sort of a way to get from one side to the other. Just going back and forth here a little bit, pressing a little harder as I get closer, because this will be a lot darker in this area because it's closer to us. And it'll fade out as it gets further away. There we go. And I think what I might do to that is I'm going to get my smudge brush and just lightly go over the edges of this. And as you can probably tell right away, this is taking some of the distinctiveness out of the sides of the pathway, just sort of blurring it in a little bit. This pathway's been here for a long time, so it's not going to be overly detailed. Lots of people have walked on this over the years, and in fact I might even just really pull it in the back here so it kind of shows a lot of distance. And with that, I'm going to call this piece finished for this class. We can pick up on this next class and put in some more detail, and you can certainly work on this on your own as well, on your own time. Feel free to use your imagination, and welcome to digital art. This is a wonderful medium. I'm sure you're going to enjoy it, and I hope you get a lot of satisfaction from learning something new and working with digital art. Again, many thanks for joining me today, and thank you and have a wonderful day.